It was a cold, foggy evening in Michigan when I first heard the story. It was at a small, dimly lit bar on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where time seems to stand still. The air inside smelled like stale beer, wood smoke, and the faint scent of old leather. You could hear the soft hum of conversations blending with the crackling sound of the jukebox in the corner, playing songs that everyone knew, but no one cared to remember the names of. It was the kind of place where everyone gathers after a long day, swapping stories, talking about everything and nothing at all. I was sitting at the bar with a few old friends, Jake, Greg, and Tony. We'd been coming to this place for years, each of us with our own reasons for being there. But it was always the same. A break from the mundane, a chance to relax, and, more often than not, to listen to some outlandish story someone had overheard or read about. The usual stories were filled with ghosts, cryptids, and haunted woods. Spooky stuff to get a rise out of people. Nothing to take seriously. But that night, something changed. Something in the air felt different. The fog outside had rolled in heavy and thick, turning the sky into a murky gray. The streets were quiet. The usual bustle of people coming and going now drowned in the silence of the night. As we all sat around the worn-out wooden table, drinking our beers and talking, Greg leaned in, lowering his voice so only we could hear. He had that look in his eyes, the kind of look you get when you're about to say something you probably shouldn't. It wasn't the usual drunken ramble. This time, his words carried a weight, a certain seriousness that made me uneasy. "There's a house up in the woods," he began, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You can't miss it." We all paused, glancing over at him. It wasn't the first time Greg had started a story like this, but there was something in the way he said it that caught my attention. He wasn't joking. His eyes were wide, and his voice trembled ever so slightly, as if the words themselves were afraid of leaving his mouth. "It used to be an old farmhouse," Greg continued, glancing over his shoulder, as if he feared someone might overhear. "People called it the House of the Forgotten." Jake snorted, taking a swig of his beer. "What? You mean some creepy house in the woods where people think ghosts live? Sounds like the usual crap." Greg shook his head, his face grim. "No, man, this isn't like the other stories you've heard. This place, it's different." He looked directly at us now, his voice steady, but filled with something that could only be described as fear. For years, no one dared go near it, not a single person. I heard that the locals talk about it in hushed tones. No one knows the full story. All they know is that something terrible happened there. Tony leaned forward, clearly intrigued now. "Terrible? What do you mean? Like a murder or something?" Greg looked around the bar, ensuring no one else was listening, then lowered his voice even more. "It's not just a murder, Tony. It's Something worse. Something that turned that house into a place where no one can ever escape from. They say it doesn't just kill you. It takes something from you. Your soul. Your very essence. It's like it traps you inside forever. The mood in the room shifted instantly. Jake stopped laughing, his face going serious. Tony, too, seemed less interested in mocking and more focused on what Greg was saying. I could feel a knot forming in my stomach, a strange unease creeping up on me. I didn't want to believe it. After all, I'd heard stories like this before. Every small town has its haunted house story, the one that everyone tells to get a reaction out of the new guy or to scare the kids. But the way Greg spoke, the way he was looking at us, made me second-guess everything. "Why is it called the House of the Forgotten?" I asked, my voice sounding louder than I meant it to, cutting through the silence that had fallen over the group. Greg hesitated before answering. "Because anyone who goes in, they forget. They forget everything. Their past, their life, everything. It's like the house eats them alive. But not in the way you think. It doesn't just kill you and leave you to rot. It takes something much more valuable. And when it's done, all that's left is a hollow shell. A body that's walking, but isn't really alive anymore." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. It wasn't the foggy evening or the eerily quiet streets outside that were making me uneasy now. It was the weight of Greg's words. He wasn't making this up. Not in the way people usually make up stories over drinks. This wasn't a harmless ghost story or a joke to tell around a campfire. This was something much darker, and it felt real. "I don't know, Greg," Jake said, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. "That sounds like one of those stories that gets passed down, you know? Like a legend people tell to keep kids from going out into the woods at night. It's probably just some old abandoned house, and people make up stories about it to freak everyone out." Greg didn't respond immediately. He stared down at his glass, lost in thought. Finally, he looked up, locking eyes with each of us. "I used to think that too, but I met someone who survived it." His voice dropped to a near whisper again. "He was the only one who ever came back." We were all leaning in now, hanging on every word he said. He said, the house didn't just take his memories. It took his will to live. It drained him, piece by piece. He couldn't remember who he was, why he was there, or what had happened to him before he entered. All he knew was that he had to get out, and when he did, he didn't feel human anymore. He felt like he was still inside, still trapped, but in some other way. And when he tried to tell people what had happened, they just thought he was crazy. So, he left. He left town and never came back. I couldn't help but shiver at Greg's words. There was no humor in them, no hint of exaggeration. It was the kind of story you hear about old legends, the ones that don't feel made up, but like they come from somewhere deeper, somewhere darker. I didn't think much about it that night. At least I tried not to. It was just a story, right? Just another tale in a long line of spooky legends we tell ourselves to keep the night interesting. But as I drove home, the words kept echoing in my head. The House of the Forgotten. It was like the name itself was calling to me, like something was tugging at my mind, pulling me in. For days after that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to Greg's story than I had realized. What if it was true? What if the house really did exist? And what if, just like Greg said, it wasn't just a place, but something much darker? I couldn't get it out of my head. I needed to know. A few weeks later, curiosity got the better of me. I couldn't stop thinking about the story Greg had told us, about the house in the woods, about the way he looked when he spoke about it. It stayed with me in the back of my mind, like a whisper I couldn't quite make out, something I couldn't ignore. I wasn't the type to believe in ghost stories or urban legends, but there was something about that house that gnawed at me. I'd heard of places like it before. Places people whispered about. Places you were supposed to stay away from. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. More that I needed to see for myself. One night, I was hanging out with Jake. As usual, he wasn't the type to back down from anything, especially not from a dare. I casually mentioned the house, not thinking much of it, just sharing it as another spooky story, the kind of "You're serious, aren't you?" he asked, leaning forward with a grin that made me nervous. I shrugged. I mean, I don't know. I guess I've just been thinking about it. Jake didn't need much more encouragement. His eyes lit up like I'd just handed him the greatest idea in the world. "Let's go check it out," he said, his voice so casual it almost sounded like he was suggesting we go grab some beers. I opened my mouth to protest, to say something about how stupid it was. But before I could get the words out, Jake was already on his feet, pulling his jacket on. "It's just a house," he said. "We're not stupid. We'll go in, take a couple of pics, and leave." Simple as that. There was no use arguing with him. I knew that look in his eyes too well. He wasn't backing down. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. Maybe I wanted to see it too. Maybe I wanted to know if it was just another ghost story. Another creepy house that was better left in the past. Or maybe I just didn't want to be the one to back out, to let Jake go alone. Either way, we were going. We hopped into the car, and I tried to ignore the unease growing in the pit of my stomach. The more I thought about it, the more I regretted my decision. The house wasn't just some abandoned building. It was the House of the Forgotten. That name alone was enough to make me second-guess everything. But there was no turning back now. Jake was already driving, and the road was getting narrower, winding through dense forest. The trees pressed in on both sides, whispering secrets I couldn't quite understand. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound amplified, their limbs twisting into shapes that almost seemed to reach out at us. The air grew thicker, and the fog rolled in like a heavy blanket, swallowing up everything in sight. The atmosphere was oppressive. The further we drove, the quieter it seemed. It was like the world around us had fallen into a deep, eerie silence, and the only sound was the soft hum of the engine and the occasional crunch of gravel beneath the tires. My nerves were starting to get the best of me. I tried to convince myself it was just a house, just another creepy location in the middle of nowhere, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Something felt wrong, and I couldn't place it. Something wasn't right. Jake noticed my growing discomfort, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he just drove faster, the headlights cutting through the fog, illuminating only what was directly in front of us. We passed a few more turns, the trees closing in tighter, the road shrinking until it was little more than a narrow trail leading deeper into the woods. Then, finally, we turned a sharp corner, and there it was, the house. At first, it didn't look like much. It was a run-down, decaying building, standing in the middle of the forest, like it had been forgotten by time itself. But the closer we got, the more unsettling it became. It wasn't just old. It was wrong. There was a darkness to it, something about the way it loomed in the fog, standing silent and still, like it was waiting for us. The windows were boarded up, the door hanging off its hinges, like it had been forced open years ago. The paint on the outside was peeling, revealing patches of rotting wood underneath. It looked abandoned, but something about it made my stomach turn. It wasn't just an old farmhouse. It was something more, something dead. I could feel the unease in my chest tightening, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. This place was wrong. It felt wrong. "Let's just get this over with," I muttered, more to myself than to Jake. I could hear my voice shake, and I didn't like it. It wasn't fear. It was something else, something primal. My instincts were telling me to turn around, to leave, but I wasn't about to be the one to chicken out. Not now. Jake didn't waste any time. He was already out of the car, the door slamming shut behind him, as he pulled out a flashlight from his jacket pocket. "Come on, man. Let's go," he called, grinning as though he was excited. I stayed frozen for a second longer, my eyes scanning the house. It looked even worse up close, and a cold chill ran down my spine. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I could swear the house was watching us. Reluctantly, I followed Jake, my footsteps heavy on the damp earth. The air was thick with fog, and the only sound was the crunch of our shoes on the ground and the soft whisper of the wind in the trees. The house was silent, as if it had been waiting for us to arrive. There was no sign of life, no movement, no lights, just the deep silence, broken only by the occasional creak of the old wood under our feet. As we approached the front door, I felt an odd sense of dread. It wasn't just the house. It was the forest around it, the way it seemed to close in on us, as if the trees themselves were pushing us toward the house. There was something unnatural about the way the fog clung to the ground, wrapping around the trees, like it was trying to keep us here. Jake walked up to the front door and pushed it open. It creaked loudly, the sound echoing in the stillness of the woods. I hesitated, standing just outside the doorway, staring into the darkness of the house. I could feel the weight of it, the oppressive atmosphere pressing down on me. I didn't want to go inside. "Come on, man." Jake's voice broke through my thoughts. "It's just a house. Let's get it over with. We'll take a couple of pictures, see what all the fuss is about, and leave." With one last glance at the woods behind us, I stepped inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, I felt it. A shift in the air, a weight pressing down on me. The house was cold, colder than it should have been, like it had been waiting for us to arrive. My flashlight flickered as I took a step further inside, and I suddenly felt like I was no longer alone. I didn't know why, but I felt like we were being watched. Jake didn't seem to notice. He was already moving deeper into the house, flashlight bouncing as he explored. I followed him, though every step felt heavier than the last. There was something in the silence that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Something waiting. I should have turned back. The moment we stepped inside, I felt it. It was like the air itself had changed. The temperature seemed to drop, and the air thickened, as if something was pressing down on us, holding us in place. I could feel it. Something intangible. Something watching us from the shadows. It wasn't a physical presence, not like a person or an animal, but something far more unsettling. It was as if the house itself was alive, aware of our intrusion. I shivered, not from the cold, but from the oppressive feeling that seemed to weigh on my chest, making it hard to breathe. The floor creaked under our feet as we moved deeper into the house. Every step felt like we were disturbing something long dormant, like the house had been waiting for us. The silence was overwhelming. No distant sounds of wind, no rustling of leaves outside, just the sound of our footsteps echoing in the stillness. The air was heavy with the scent of decay, like old wood, damp mold, and something rotten, as though the house had been forgotten by time itself. I looked around as we moved further in, trying to steady my nerves. The house looked like it had been abandoned for decades. The furniture was covered in thick layers of dust, and the walls were cracked, peeling, like they hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint in a century. The windows were boarded up, and the dim light that filtered through the cracks only added to the sense of isolation. The air felt stagnant, as though it had been trapped inside for far too long. We walked through the rooms slowly, our footsteps muffled by the dust that coated everything. I snapped a few pictures on my phone, though it didn't feel like the usual carefree exploration we'd done in other old buildings. There was something different here. Every room we entered seemed frozen in time, as though nothing had changed in years, perhaps even longer. A part of me wanted to turn back, but the other part, curiosity, stubbornness, or maybe even something darker, urged me to keep going. Jake was ahead of me, his flashlight sweeping over the furniture, the floor, the walls, taking in everything as if he were on some sort of mission. I watched him, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. He didn't seem to notice it, the same feeling I couldn't seem to ignore. He was too busy moving from one room to the next, making jokes about how creepy it all was. His voice echoed in the emptiness, a hollow sound that only... Then it happened. A whisper. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the house was eerily still. There was no breeze, no rustling of leaves, nothing to explain the faint sound. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, everything was still. Only our movements and the creaking of the old wood beneath our feet broke the silence. But this whisper, it was soft, almost inaudible, but clear enough to make my heart race. The words weren't loud, but they were there, right in my ear, like a voice from somewhere just beyond the edge of my hearing. Help me. I froze, every muscle in my body locking up. My heart skipped a beat. The blood drained from my face. It wasn't just the voice that terrified me. It was the fact that there was no one else here. We were alone. Just Jake and me. Just two idiots in an old, decaying house. But that voice, it was real. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the house settling. It was a voice, soft and pleading, coming from somewhere deep inside this cursed place. I turned to Jake, my breath catching in my throat, my hands clammy. I couldn't speak for a moment, too stunned to form words. The whisper still echoed in my mind, replaying over and over, like a broken record. I finally managed to croak out a question, my voice barely above a whisper, shaky and unsure. Did you hear that? Jake looked up from the floor, where he had been inspecting something. His eyes were wide, a bit confused. What do you mean? What did you hear? I felt my pulse quicken. The voice, the whisper, it said, "Help me." Jake frowned, glancing around the room, as if expecting someone to jump out at him. "No," he said slowly, his voice uncertain now. "I didn't hear anything." But I could see it in his eyes. A flicker of doubt, a brief hesitation. It wasn't much, but it was enough. He had heard something, even if he didn't want to admit it. Maybe it was just nerves. Maybe it was just the weird atmosphere of the house. But something told me it wasn't just in my head. The look on his face, the way he stopped and glanced around. He had heard something too. We stood there in silence for a long moment. My ears rang with the echo of that whisper, and the unease in my stomach deepened. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run out of the house, get in the car, and never look back. But we were already here. We had come this far. I couldn't let fear control me. Not yet. "I think we should go," I said quietly, my voice shaking just a little. Jake didn't argue. He looked around again, this time with a more serious expression. "Yeah, you're right. Let's get out of here." But as we turned to leave, the house seemed to shift. It was subtle at first, like the floorboards beneath us were creaking louder, almost as if they were groaning in protest. The air felt thicker, heavier. I could feel the presence now, not just in the corners of my vision, but in the very air itself. It was suffocating. The house wasn't just a building. It felt like it had a heartbeat, a pulse, and it was getting stronger. I turned back to Jake. "Do you feel that? It's like..." We see forest. Like something's here with us. Jake didn't respond immediately. He was staring ahead, his face pale, his eyes wide. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Then a low sound filled the room. It wasn't a whisper this time. It was something far worse. A growl, a sound that wasn't human. It came from somewhere deep within the walls, as if the house itself was alive, trying to communicate. The growl rumbled through the floor, vibrating under our feet. We both froze. My heart raced in my chest, and for a moment, all I could hear was the sound of my own breath, shallow and frantic. "We need to get out of here," Jake finally whispered, his voice trembling. But as we turned to leave, the hallway seemed to stretch longer, the door we had come through further away than it should have been. It was like the house was playing tricks on us, shifting and warping, trapping us inside its walls. The door that had once been wide open now looked like it was miles away. Something wasn't right. We had to leave. We had to get out. But the house didn't want us to go. We turned to leave. And that's when we realized something had gone terribly wrong. The door, the one we had entered through, the one that should have been our exit, wasn't there anymore. It wasn't just that it had disappeared. It was as if the house itself had decided to seal us in. The doorframe was still there, but the door itself was nowhere to be found. Just an empty space, like it had never existed at all. I stepped forward, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. My heart was pounding in my chest, and the feeling of claustrophobia began to settle over me, like a heavy weight. The house seemed to be closing in around us. I reached for the doorframe, hoping, praying that maybe it was some kind of trick. But there was nothing. No handle, no door, just an open hole leading into more darkness. "Jake," I called out, my voice trembling with panic. The door's gone." Jake didn't say anything at first. I could see the confusion in his eyes, the disbelief. He walked over to the wall, his hand running over the rough surface, searching for something, anything that could explain what was happening. But nothing. The walls were solid, unyielding. The windows, those old, dusty windows, were shut tight. We couldn't open them. We couldn't escape. The house wasn't letting us leave. "Jake, we need to get out, now," I said again. My voice much more desperate this time. I was beginning to feel a tightening in my chest, like the walls themselves were pushing in on me, forcing the air out of my lungs. Jake's face had turned pale, his eyes wide. He didn't argue, but I could see the same panic rising in him too. We both rushed to another door we found nearby, hoping that it would lead somewhere, anywhere, that would get us out of this nightmare. But when we opened it, we found ourselves right back in the same room. The same broken furniture, the same moldy walls, the same peeling wallpaper. It was as if the house had swallowed us whole. And now we were trapped inside, endlessly repeating the same horrifying loop. I let out a strangled breath, a sense of dread curling around my gut. The walls were closing in, and I could feel the temperature drop even more, as if the house was sucking the warmth out of the air. We were trapped, and we were running out of time. That's when we heard it. Footsteps. The sound was faint at first, but it quickly grew louder, reverberating through the floorboards beneath our feet. Slow, heavy steps, like someone was dragging their feet along the wood. But there was no one there. At least, no one we could see. I turned to Jake, my heart thundering in my chest. "What the hell is that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the pounding in my ears. Jake didn't answer at first. He just stood there, staring at the ceiling. Then, slowly, he nodded. "It's coming from upstairs," he said, his voice strained. He was scared now, no longer the bravado of the guy who dared us to come here. Now we were both on edge, both trapped in a nightmare we couldn't escape. We didn't hesitate. We started to move toward the stairs, the sound of the dragging footsteps growing louder with each passing second. My legs felt like lead as I climbed the steps, but something pushed me forward, something primal, like instinct, telling me we had to go up there. Maybe it was the hope of finding an exit, or maybe it was the fear of what we would find if we didn't. Either way, we had no choice but to follow the sound, to go toward whatever it was that was waiting for us. The stairs creaked under our weight as we climbed higher, the air colder with each step. By the time we reached the top, I could feel the chill seeping into my bones, like the house itself was trying to freeze us in place. At the end of the hall, there was a door. It was cracked open, just enough for us to see inside. I hesitated before pushing the door fully open, my hand shaking. It was the kind of hesitation you get when you know something bad is waiting on the other side, but you have no choice but to face it. We stepped into the room. It was dusty, the air thick with years of neglect. The furniture inside was old, like everything else in this cursed house, but it was the mirror on the far wall that caught my attention. It stood tall, a large, ornate frame surrounding it. The glass was so dark that it almost looked like it was black. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the reflection. It wasn't us. Not entirely. The reflection in the mirror was twisted, distorted, like something was wrong with the very nature of the glass. Our faces were wrong, stretched, eyes hollow, as if the mirror had taken pieces of us and turned them into something grotesque. My own reflection had no depth, no life, just empty, hollow eyes staring back at me. I recoiled, my heart racing faster than I thought possible. "What the hell is that?" I gasped, my voice strangled. My hand shot out to grab Jake's arm, pulling him back. But when I looked at him, his face was just as twisted as mine in the mirror. The house wasn't just distorting the glass, it was distorting us. Jake didn't say anything. He was staring at his own reflection, his face ashen, his eyes wide with fear. The longer we stood there, the more the mirror seemed to pull us in, drawing us closer, as if it wanted to swallow us whole. I could feel the weight of it, the gravity of the reflection, pulling me toward the glass. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. And then I understood. The house didn't just trap people, it took them. Not just their bodies, but their very essence. It didn't just kill them. It devoured them, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. Until they were lost forever. And the mirror, it was showing us what we would become. Lost, hollow reflections of ourselves. I could feel my body trembling as the realization sank in. We weren't just stuck here. We weren't just trapped in an old house. We were being consumed. The house was eating us. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything to escape. But the door we had entered through was gone. The hallway had changed. The whole room had shifted. The house was shifting, and we were becoming a part of it, slowly disappearing, piece by piece. I could feel it deep inside me. The house was feeding on us, and we couldn't stop it. We were already too far gone. There was no escaping. We were already lost to the house. Just another pair of souls to be consumed. I turned to Jake, my voice barely a whisper. We have to leave. We have to. But I never finished the sentence, because by then, the house had already claimed us. By the time we realized what was happening, it was too late. The change had come so gradually, so insidiously, that we hadn't noticed it at first. But now, it was all too clear. The whispers, which had started as soft, almost imperceptible murmurs, had grown louder, more urgent. They filled the air around us, winding through the cracks in the walls and the corners of the house, slipping into our minds like a poison. The words weren't clear at first, but as they grew louder, they began to take shape. Come closer, join us, stay with us. They weren't words of comfort. They weren't pleading. No, they were demands, commands, pushing and pulling at the edges of my consciousness, filling my head with dread, with confusion. I felt my grip on reality slipping. It was like the house itself was talking to us, its voice seeping into our minds, wrapping around our thoughts until it was all I could hear. The longer we stayed, the more I felt myself slipping, losing hold of who I was, losing track of what was real. I turned to Jake, desperate for something, anything, to pull me back from the edge. But he wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the walls, his eyes wide and unfocused, as if he were looking at something just beyond my sight. The fear on his face had become a blank mask, like he wasn't even aware I was there. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, a chorus of voices that seemed to press in on us from all sides. It was impossible to think, impossible to focus on anything other than the suffocating weight of the house closing in on us. "Jake," I called out, my voice shaking, but it didn't matter. He didn't respond. I grabbed his arm, pulling him, trying to snap him out of whatever trance he was in. but it was like trying to pull him out of quicksand. The more I pulled, the more the house seemed to drag him in. His eyes flickered for a moment, and he looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. Why, it was too late. "Jake!" I shouted, my voice breaking. And then, just like that, the house shifted. I don't know how to describe it, but the walls seemed to move, to twist and stretch in ways that defied reason. The floor beneath our feet warped, and the hallway that had seemed so familiar just moments ago now stretched on endlessly. A maze of dark, decaying rooms that led nowhere. The doors that had once been open slammed shut, locking us in. And when we tried to open them, they wouldn't budge. The house wasn't just trapping us. It was reshaping itself, closing in around us, making it impossible to escape. The air grew colder, the silence more oppressive. The whispers were no longer just voices. They were feelings, emotions, swirling around us like a storm, filling our hearts with dread, our minds with confusion. It was as if the house was feeding on us, taking pieces of us, piece by piece, until there would be nothing left. I tried to run, my legs moving faster than I thought possible, but it didn't matter. No matter which way I turned, no matter how fast I ran, I always found myself back at the same place, standing in the same dark, empty room. The house had become a labyrinth, a living thing that shifted and changed to keep us inside. The walls seemed to close in tighter, the air thicker, the whispers louder, until I couldn't tell what was real anymore. And then I saw them, the others. Dozens of them, standing in the corners of the rooms, in the shadows, their eyes wide with terror. The souls of those who had come before us, trapped forever in the house, unable to escape, their faces frozen in an expression of fear that never faded. They weren't moving, not physically, but their presence was undeniable. I could feel them, their eyes on me, watching, judging, warning me. They were the ones who had stayed too long, the ones the house had claimed before us. They were the ones who had been consumed, turned into nothing more than lost shadows, trapped forever in the house's grasp. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized the truth. This wasn't just a house. This wasn't just a place that held us captive. It was feeding on us, devouring us, bit by bit. The longer we stayed, the more it took. Our memories, our emotions, our very essence. It didn't just want our bodies. It wanted our souls. It wasn't satisfied until it had consumed everything we were. We weren't just trapped here. We were being broken down, torn apart, piece by piece, until we became like the others, lost, empty, reflections of ourselves, stuck forever in this twisted house. Jake screamed, a blood-curdling sound that cut through the air like a knife. His voice echoed in the rooms, bouncing off the walls. But it didn't sound like his voice anymore. It was distorted, twisted, as if the house itself had taken control of him. His face was a mask of terror, his eyes wide with fear as he backed away from me, stumbling over his own feet. I could feel it, deep down in my bones. The house had already taken him. It had already consumed him. His screams grew quieter, fading into nothing as the house swallowed him whole. The last thing I saw was his face, his terrified face, before the walls closed in, swallowing him up. I ran. I didn't know how I moved my legs, how I found the strength to keep going, but I did. My body was screaming at me to stop, to give in, to let the house take me too. But I couldn't. I had to get out. I had to escape before the house took me, like it had taken Jake. I don't remember how long I ran. Time seemed to stretch and bend in that place, like it wasn't real. But somehow I stumbled across a door. Just a door. No different from the others, but this one opened. Don't know how, don't know why. I didn't stop to think. The cold air hit me like a slap in the face. The fog had lifted, and the world around me was still and quiet. The trees swaying gently in the breeze. The house loomed in the distance, dark and silent, like it was waiting for the next soul to wander in. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I had made it out, but I knew deep down that it was only a matter of time before the house found its next victim. It was always hungry, always waiting for someone to stumble into its grasp. I couldn't forget what I had seen. The souls of the lost, trapped in that place, their faces twisted in eternal fear. I didn't know if they had ever realized what had happened to them, if they had known what the house was doing to them before it was too late. But I knew one thing for sure. Once you entered, once the house had you, there was no escape. It was always hungry, and no one ever leaves. I don't know how long it's been since that night. Time has blurred into an endless haze. The days and nights merging into one. The memories are fading, slipping away like sand through my fingers. But the fear, the cold terror still clings to me. It hasn't left, not for a second. It's like a shadow that follows me, lurking just out of sight, always there, always watching. The house, I know, is still there, waiting, feeding, devouring anyone foolish enough to wander too close. And sometimes, when the wind is just right, I can still hear the whispers. They come from the depths of the woods, from that cursed place, a soft, mocking voice that calls to me, a constant reminder of what I barely escaped. I wish I could forget it. I wish I could shut my mind off, block it all out, and move on. But it doesn't work like that. I know now that the house doesn't just trap your body. It traps your mind, your soul. It burrows into you, leaving a mark that no amount of time can erase. Sometimes, late at night, I'll catch myself staring at the shadows in my room, half expecting to see the door to that house open behind me, to hear the creak of the floorboards, to feel the cold air rush in as the house calls me back. I know it's not real, but the fear lingers, and it always will. It's as if the house has somehow embedded itself into the very fabric of my being. A constant presence, even though I'm miles away from that cursed place. But I can't ignore it. The whispers never stop. They're not loud, not always, but I can hear them in the silence. A soft rustling sound, like the wind through trees, but somehow different. Like they're trying to communicate with me. I don't know what they want, but I've stopped trying to figure it out. They want something. I know that much. And they won't stop until they get it. I've heard rumors since that night. Stories from others who have ventured near the woods. Stories about the house that never seems to disappear. No matter how much time passes. People say it's just a building, abandoned and forgotten. But I know better. The house is still there, still watching, still waiting. It doesn't matter how much time passes, or how many people say it's just an old myth, an urban legend. The house doesn't care. It doesn't care who you are or where you come from. It doesn't care if you're lost or if you're looking for a thrill. It just wants to feed. And if you're unlucky enough to cross its path, it will take you, piece by piece, until there's nothing left but a hollow shell. I've heard people talk about the house in the woods, in hushed tones, as if they think it's just a story. But I know the truth, and I don't want anyone else to make the mistake I did. I don't want anyone else to walk into that trap, to feel the way I felt when I realized that there was no escape. I don't care if you're curious, or if you think it's just some silly ghost story. The house doesn't care about your curiosity. It doesn't care about your logic. All it cares about is feeding, and it will do whatever it takes to get what it wants. There are people who still go there, people who think they can handle it, who think they can outsmart the house. They think it's just a place, an old building with a creepy history. They go in, take their pictures, maybe mess around a little, thinking they're brave. But they never leave. Not really. Maybe they walk out of the door, but they don't ever leave the house. Not truly. I know that now. I can see it in their eyes when I meet them. That same emptiness that was in me when I escaped. The house takes something from you, something deep inside. And no matter where you go, no matter how far you run, it will always be with you. It will always call to you. I remember the way the house felt. The air was thick, heavy, like the walls were alive, breathing, shifting. And the silence, God, the silence, it wasn't peaceful. It wasn't calming. It was suffocating. Like the house was waiting for you to make a sound so it could devour it. The floors creaked underfoot, but it wasn't just the house settling. It was the sound of the house waking, the sound of it preparing to claim what was rightfully its, and the whispers. Always the whispers, soft at first, barely there, but then louder, insistent, wrapping themselves around your mind until you couldn't think about anything else. It was like the house was reaching into you, pulling out your thoughts, your memories, and feeding on them, slowly, steadily. I can still feel it sometimes, that pull. It's not physical, not really. It's more like a weight, an invisible hand on my chest, pressing down, telling me to go back, telling me that I haven't finished what I started. The house doesn't let go. It doesn't forget, and it never stops watching. There are nights when I wake up in a cold sweat, my heart racing, my breath shallow, and for a moment, I don't know where I am. I hear the whispers, soft at first, then louder, like they're right next to me. I can almost feel the cold, that biting chill that seeps into your bones when you're inside the house. I've learned not to pay attention to it, but sometimes, late at night, I'll catch myself listening, my mind wandering back to the house, back to that place. I don't know why I still think about it. I should have forgotten. I should have left it behind. But it's always there, waiting for me. It always will be. Because once you've stepped inside, once the house has claimed you, there's no leaving. I know now that the house doesn't care if you survive or not. It doesn't care if you escape, as long as it gets what it wants. It wants to feed, and it doesn't stop until it's taken everything. Your fear, your memories, your very essence. It doesn't matter who you are or what you've done. The house takes what it needs, and you can't fight it. You can't outrun it. And no matter where you go, no matter how far you try to run, it will always be waiting for you. If you're ever in Michigan and you hear people talk about the House of the Forgotten, don't go. Don't even think about it. Because once you step inside, once you cross that threshold, you'll never leave. Not really. You'll leave with pieces of yourself missing, and no matter how hard you try, you won't be able to forget what you've seen. The house will always be with you, always calling, always waiting for the next soul to devour. And one day, you'll be just like the others, frozen in time, a shadow of who you used to be, trapped forever in the house that never lets go. It's still out there, and it's waiting.